Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Halal Gap. I'm your host, Sikandar and Atiq, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Sofia Alani. If you guys have enjoyed our episodes of the Halal Gap so far and want to make sure not to miss the next one, please follow us on Apple and Spotify and leave us a review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Are you looking to sharpen your skills ahead of your next big project? Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people on topics including illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. Sign up for Skillshare today and get a free month off by clicking the link in the bottom of the description of this episode. We have an incredible guest joining us today. Take it away, Sofia.
She is a TIFF Next Wave filmmaker, Hot Docs Accelerator Fellow, and the founder of Films with a Cause, an advocacy and consulting startup for authentic storytelling of underrepresented communities. She is currently in development on her first feature documentary about sickle cell disease and is working on her narrative short film called One Day. Earlier this year, she joined BIPOC TV and Film as their advocacy and outreach lead. Joining us all the way from Toronto, please welcome Yazmeen Kanji.
Woohoo! Hi. So excited
Hello.
to be here. I listen to this podcast all the time, so bit of a fan.
People never tell us that, so we really
Okay.
No,
well,
I had 3 people telling me that in Montreal, so I was pretty stoked about that. Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow.
I don't know if they're just being kind, but I'll take it because I have a fragile ego.
Oh my God.
Counts,
no,
man.
I'm a super nerd when it comes to seeking out Muslim filmmakers. So I'm always like searching for podcasts to listen to. I'm cooking or cleaning or whatever it is. So yeah.
Podcasts are the best for that.
Yeah.
We're great background cooking music. I mean, I
Yeah,
feel
exactly,
like this needs to be emphasized more.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you need a soundtrack to your mundane day? How about the
Yeah,
Halal
exactly
Gap?
right.
The Halal Gap.
Well, again, thank you for joining us. As with all of our guests, we like to kind of dive in right from the start. And I know you specifically have like a very interesting kind of Yazmeen and I had the honor of being a part of a very intensive lab over this past weekend in Montreal. And you mentioned the story about when you were in the 5th grade that kind of launched your social advocacy work throughout your life. So I was wondering if you might be able to share that with us.
Sure. Oh my gosh, 5th grade. So there was a playground being built on our school, and it was like a fancy new playground. But what we used to do was just walk across to the school beside us and, use their playground. And there were all of these like very intense initiatives taking place at the school for building this playground. And I was realizing that we weren't putting on any initiatives to help a community that was, beyond our school community. And I would go home, and my mom always had the Oprah show on, and Oprah always brought on these folks who had difficult life experiences, talking about resources that they lacked in their lives. And then she had these girls that she would support to go to school. And so I was just thinking like, okay, well, we're spending all of this money on a new playground. I can just cross the street to go to that playground. And, all of this money could build like 10 schools in Kenya for girls to go to school. And that was my thinking in grade 5. And so I marched into the principal's office, very angry about this once, everything kind of clicked for me. And, I said, what are we doing? Like, we're allowed to go to school. And I've just learned that there's all of these kids that can't go to school. And we're spending money on a playground. And she's like, okay, so what do you want to do about it? And I thought about it for a while, and then I got some friends together, and we started what I called the global response team. So from grade 5 to grade 8, we would put on school dances, like food drives, clothing drives. And it wasn't just like for initiatives in the community, but it was, like we sent shoes to Haiti, and we did all sorts of things that kind of had like a global reach to it. But yeah, so I think I was like I was a mini, social justice warrior from a young age. And I kind of, I guess, carried that fire with me until today.
Amazing. Did the playground get built? Not that it's a reflection on
It
your
did.
effectiveness.
It did get built. It did. And I was just sitting there, like not not
Throwing
clapping
tomatoes
for
at
it.
them.
I had very little school spirit.
Holding up protest banners
Yeah.
and
Literally,
love it.
yeah. Yes,
Oh my
exactly.
god. Amazing.
Yeah.
And so like with that, like was that relatively well received by your community, or like were people like, why aren't you just happy with this playground child?
Yeah, pretty, like, it was, like, split. Like, I think there were a couple of teachers who saw what I was trying to do, and they were impressed and wanted to support me. But sometimes I would just, go a little bit too far, whatever that means, and then I would get told, like, we do need to give back to our school sometimes, Yazmeen, like, we can't always be giving the funds to, Kenya. And I was like, yeah, but like we have an education, and and the other thing is my dad was raised in Kenya as well. So when I'd see these images, like it felt closer than the way that other folks in my school felt about it. But definitely, like, kids were like I would be debating with kids about homelessness at recess and all of these types of things. But then eventually in my yearbook, everyone kind of wrote something like, oh, you made me think differently about this and about that. And so I was like, okay, it all paid off.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. I feel like we would have been very, very good friends.
I
I like that.
And I would have just been in the background being like, can we just use this playground, please? Like, it is so nice.
Yeah.
You guys
I
are
still
so
use the
teaching
playground, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You touched on the fact that your dad was from Kenya, grew up in
Mhm.
Kenya, I believe, and your mom is Guyanese, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. So bit of a different mixed cultural
Mhm.
background. Was that something that you were kind of mindful of as a child? I'm sure with all of your social advocacy work from the age of 11, you were wise beyond your years. But was that mixed culture kind of something that played into your upbringing as well as you were growing up in Toronto?
Yeah, for sure, because I had an outlook on life that just went beyond what my day to day was like. Like I grew up hearing stories of my mom, and her stilt house
Mm.
in Guyana, and my dad always told stories about what it was like to grow up in Nairobi, and that was so fascinating to me that my parents had such a different childhood than I was having. And at the same time, my parents always really tried to emphasize the importance of using your privilege to help others and to give back to your community. So I think one of the first trips I was ever on was to Kenya when I was like 2 years old. So, from a very young age, I guess it was like within my subconscious that, there's life beyond Canada, and it's beautiful, and where there is a need to give back, that when you have the ability to do so, that it's your responsibility to do that. And of course also goes back to, like, how I was raised and as a Sunni Muslim, and like having that Islamic responsibility to give back as well was really important in my childhood. And so it's interesting because I've never been back to East Africa. I've never been to Kenya, and I've never been to India. And I would really, really love to make that trip of kind of like discovering my roots, because now I'm really seeking that a lot more. Like, I've created a character that's Indo-Caribbean so that I have like an excuse to dive more into Guyanese culture. But for sure, like, I think being exposed to so many different cultures just made me more interested in different ways that people live and different ways that people experience um, the world. And so, like, my dad came from a culture that fused, Indian and East African cultures, and my mom came from a culture that fused Indian and Caribbean cultures. So, yeah, I was just always really like exposed to multiple different cultures, traditions, and that made me like want to explore other cultures as well.
So you have like your first passion is kind of this like advocacy, this social justice, is kind of connecting with other people around the world. And then how did like art and film kind of play into that? Like, how did that become a co-passion with the social justice stuff?
Mhm. I mean, I think at first they existed in parallel. So, like my favorite movies were musicals, like Bollywood, and then like Disney Channel, like Cheetah Girls, and anything that was just very extra, very dramatic. I loved all of that. I thought I was gonna be Hannah Montana when I grew up, or Raven Simone. Oh my god, I love that So Raven so much.
It's so good.
Um, yes, but I was all, and then I have 3 younger siblings, so I would make them put on all these shows for our family. Like I would take my parents' camcorder, and I'd be like, okay, so you're John, you're Ashley, I'm Mary Kate, and this is what's gonna happen right now. And oh my god, the videos they're so priceless, like when you look back at them. But like I think that was a way that I also like tried to entertain my siblings too. Like my mom never really like put us into extracurriculars because she wanted to encourage us to be close as siblings, and to like play and be creative. So that was the thing that I was just drawn towards, is like wanting to capture and record the things that we would do at home. And so yeah, it existed in parallel. And then I think at a certain point, maybe I think I was in like grade 7, I had to do a couple more, like projects where I would have the option to like write an essay or make a video. And then I started like playing around more with, making videos for school projects. Yeah. And then eventually I was like, well, why not just, do both at the same time?
And then that culminated, I think, in high school. You made a film that was kind of bridging the
Mhm.
two, From Syria to Hope, I believe it was called.
So yeah, From Syria to Hope was the one that I actually started in university,
Oh, okay.
but in high school there was a short film competition that I submitted to, and I won second place. And I think it had to do with, I don't even remember it that well actually, and I really hope that no one even tries to like look it up. But I think it had something to do with like gang violence and like combating that or something. And I won second place at this short film competition in York Region, and it landed me a prize to go on the set of Saving Hope for a
Mm.
day. And so I spent like the next couple months like binge watching the show. I got really excited about it. Yeah, and then I got to go on the set of the show, and I think that was a really interesting moment for me because I had like fantasized and dreamed about what it would be like to be on a set, and then I was finally there. And I remember this PA like whispered over to me, and he's like, don't do it, don't do it. And I was like, oh, but it's also dreamy. But I had a really interesting conversation with Erica Durance, who is the lead on Saving Hope. And I remember she was like, if this is something you really want to do, you need to make sure that you establish your own personal values. You need to know why you're doing this, because it's not all about the glamour and being on camera or whatever. She's like, you have to have like a really personal purpose, and that's the thing that's going to drive you, and you need to be grounded in family. And all of everything that she told me, like I really remembered and took with me. And I think that was one of those moments that like launched me into really believing that like I could pursue a career in this industry.
It's so fascinating to me that like at such a young age, you've been able to produce and just go after so much, so many of these projects, which I wonder if, like, as technology and as the ability to produce content, becomes easier and easier to make at home, do you think that that's going to start to open up even more opportunities for young talented individuals, Muslim or otherwise, to start to share these types of very impactful stories? Like, how do you think? Because I like when I was in high school or like junior high or before, like I had like Windows Movie Maker, and it would be like
Mhm.
a PowerPoint with like maybe a backing track on it. Like that's as far
Right.
advanced as you could get at that point. Like, do you think this is going to start to open up substantially more opportunities for young people to just kind of get involved, utilizing arts to tell their story?
I think so. I mean, we're at an age where everything is accessible if you have, like a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more like an issue of people having like the willingness to do it and the time and the energy to do that work. Because I had a family that was big on movies and big on cameras, so I had accessibility to that, and I know like not everyone has that. And not everyone has like the permission to also try, which I feel like I had. Like my mom really encouraged me, and yeah, like movies were just such a big part of my life, not just because I loved it, but because like my family did too. Like we that was our way of bonding and connecting, like with immediate family, extended family. Like we would have movie nights, or like me and my siblings were put on shows. Like we were very much like an entertainment based, family. And so all of that like gave me permission to try and see like what I could do on my own with with the cameras that we had, and iMovie and things like that started me out. So yeah, like now generally it is more accessible, and like like I hope that our communities like champion young people who want to do that more. But yeah, I think we still have a little bit to go in terms of like families kind of um allowing kids to like explore and play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, as you were talking, it sounds very much. I don't want to obviously put words in your mouth, but it sounds like a lot of what drew you to filmmaking was like that escapism, right? That ability to connect
Hmm.
with others and kind of get lost in this other world. And then you use that to 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 push kind of more documentary style or social
Hmm.
commentary style messages, which
Yeah.
to me is just like an interesting blend. Was that, I mean, I know you were so young when you made your first one, but I mean, who cares? You still made it, and it was clearly excellent. In grade 10 when you got to win that competition, was that like a conscious thing, or was that just, hey, I like movies and I'm gonna use that as my platform?
I think it was, yeah, I think it was more the latter. I just was like, hey, like I really love editing, like I love using a camera. And I think it's also, I also really love the idea that I could create something that like other people could pay attention to, like to get someone's attention to like really focus on something that I made felt very powerful to me. Like it yeah, it made me feel like there was something that I could do that could change the way that someone saw something or the way that someone felt about something. And so yeah, I think like then my documentary From Syria to Hope, that was kind of like my very first stab at creating a film that I could then use to like submit to festivals and whatnot. But that was done without like any experience whatsoever. Like I did that completely by myself, just like took a camera, like asked for favors. And it also was like a really good excuse to learn and to reach out to other established filmmakers and be like, hey, like can I get your thoughts on this or on that? Yeah.
Nice. I kind of want to bring it back, sorry, but
Go ahead. Go ahead.
but like I just like wonder cuz a lot of the conversations that we have about on this podcast are about like representation of Muslims, of course, but like general
Yeah.
representation. And so when you're talking about being on that set for the first time after you won the competition and getting this great advice that like fair enough, like it sounds like really excellent advice that you've carried with you,
Hmm.
but like in terms of seeing people that look like you or that you identify with, in front of the camera or behind the camera in the writers room, like what was that piece of it like? Were there people that you identified with, or did that even like, was that even a thing for you, or were you just like, whatever, I want to make movies, this is gonna happen for me?
Yeah, I mean, like on that set, I don't think there were really many people of color. But I don't remember that actually being something that prevented me from wanting to do it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think I was so like entranced by the whole world of filmmaking that I didn't really see anything as being able to stop me from trying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's which is like that's really cool. Like I think that that's like
Yeah.
a really beautiful quality, and I think like
Yeah.
clearly, like that's led to inshallah more success. But like that's really
Yeah.
really wonderful.
And I think the other thing was, like, I mentioned Bollywood being a really big thing for me growing up. I think, like, when you have a strong connection to a culture that, produces that kind of entertainment that's, like, on such a large scale, like, you don't make the connection that, like, Bollywood, like, is not Hollywood. And so, like, when you're seeing people
Mhm.
of color in Bollywood, like, that, doesn't always translate to, like, not having that same representation in Hollywood. Like, to me, I think I
Mhm.
just, like, naturally gravitated towards, like I
Yeah.
mentioned, like Cheetah Girls, Raven, whatever, like where I
Yeah.
saw like women of color, like I just naturally gravitated towards that content. And it wasn't
Mhm.
like, yeah, it just wasn't something that I was aware of growing
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. Which is
Mhm.
awesome. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think
It was
if
naivety. It was like
no, but you
blissful
know
like
what?
ignorance.
But maybe, but also maybe it's just a reflection of like some level of progression over the last, 15,
Mhm.
20 years. Because I'm trying to think, like Yasmin might be our youngest guest so far, maybe.
Mm.
But it
Mhm.
just it kind of presents this interesting evolution in the
Yeah.
conversation because we've had so many conversations with people in their 30s and 40s
Yeah.
and they grew up in like the 80s or the 90s where representation was like literally non-existent.
Right.
And now I think, yeah, obviously Bollywood has always been there. So I mean, if you're looking for that representation, then yes, sure enough.
Fair.
um, but but yeah, I just wonder, maybe it's just the evolution starting to finally pay dividends towards like a generation now that's maybe seeing a little bit more of themselves, not obviously at the level that I
Mhm.
think we all need, and then B is like, no, f this, I'm taking it. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think there is that certain level of like, why not, that
Yeah.
Mhm.
resonates more with like maybe the Gen Z population and
I
beyond.
think that's what it is. Like I'm now also remembering, like, I loved How to Be Indie, which is like a Canadian, like, South Asian show. So like I sought out, that kind of representation, and then seeing people who look like me, like, fueled me to want to do it even more. So I think that might be it. Like, I grew up in like early 2000s, so
Yeah, maybe,
a
but I
little
mean,
bit more than.
yeah, fair enough. But I know that you also obviously still recognize that there's a lot of work yet to be
Yeah,
done.
absolutely.
And you started something called Films with a Cause. Can you tell us a little bit
Mhm.
more about that?
Sure, yeah. So I started that in U at U of T. It was in my second year at U of T. At that point I was like going back and forth between like social justice clubs and groups and filmmaking groups, and I just was feeling like this tug of, like, I need to choose, like, where to put my energy.
Yeah.
And like that, like, social justice work was really important to me and gave me like a really strong sense of purpose. But then, like, the filmmaking was so fun, and like I remember I did like a 48-hour challenge, and there was like blood and gore, and it was so fun, and I loved it. But that at the same time, I just felt like I was putting my energy in like so many different places, and I was like, I wish there was a way that I could just, like, you know do both.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I created Films with a Cause. I was like, I don't know what it was gonna be. I was like, I just like want an excuse to, like, bridge the worlds. And so
But
yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but what were you studying? What did you take?
So I double majored. I did peace, conflict, and justice studies at the Monk School, and then critical studies of equity and solidarity, and then I minored in cinema studies.
Amazing. So okay, so you
Yeah.
you f- you focused your studies more on like the social justice aspect of
Yeah.
it and social advocacy aspect of it. Did you ever at any point think about like the other equation where you would go to film school but then be more actively involved in social justice causes outside of the academia?
I think it was the reverse. I think I thought, like, I wasn't fully sure that I was going to allow myself to, like, really pursue a career in film. So hence the minor in cinema
No,
studies.
fair enough.
And it wasn't even my parents necessarily. I think it was just like an internalized, like, belief that like, you have to be academically driven. Also, I did IB in high school.
Nice.
No big deal.
So,
Sounds
so
about right.
I was really used to like seeking validation from grades and from the academic world. And so I fell into that at U of T, obviously. And yeah, it was hard to give myself permission to just like be fully artistic, which is like what deep down I really wanted to do, because I
Mm,
thought, like if I can write this paper and do well on it, like that, maybe that means, that I should apply to law school or, do my master's in policy and whatnot. So that was like my first way of thinking about it. And then I thought, film as a hobby or film eventually. But films with a cause, yes, was like a really great excuse to sort of like dip my toes in it and see like where that could take me. So it started out as a collective of creatives at U of T, and we would put on events and host dialogue and screenings, all kind of having to do with issues of representation in the media. And so yeah, I had some really great friends that are still like really supportive of me today in like incredible ways, who helped me to start that up. Like my friend Kat, she saw me like trying, like struggling to design a logo for Films with a Cause, and she was like, why don't you just give that to me? And then she just like quickly like sketched something out, and then I was like, oh my god, like that's exactly what I was thinking. And then my other best friend Jasmine was like really into events planning, and so we hosted a premiere of my film From Syria to Hope as like our first in-person Films with a Cause event at U of T at Innis College, and like filled up the theater. And so I'm so grateful for them, and everything we've been able to do with Films with a Cause. And yeah, it's been really fun.
And do you think, like, in terms of what like the types of issues that you hope to tackle with these films, like, are you wanting to go in a certain direction, or are you open to kind of whatever comes across your attention that you're like, yes?
I mean, I feel like I should only be focused on subjects that like I can speak to, and that I have, that I feel a responsibility to speak
mm,
to, because it's not for every filmmaker to talk about or explore every
Mm-hmm.
subject, right? Like there is like a fine line between what you should and should not explore as a filmmaker. And like, so if we take From Syria to Hope as like my first documentary, I had really close access to that community because my mom was spearheading a resettlement program in York region for Syrian families. So I was, like hanging out with families like pretty often. Like they would come to our house, like we would go to their house. And like they became very close, like family friends, like we don't even speak Arabic, but we'd usually like find a way to interact, or like my mom's friend would be there who kind of act like as a translator, and it just felt very natural. Like we got along so well, and like the culture is just so inviting. And I had gone to a Catholic high school that was predominantly Italian Catholic, and I was like one of a few brown folks in that school. And so I did hear a lot of like xenophobic comments around the time that, Syrian refugees are coming into the country. And I was just so shocked how like poorly a lot of the teachers handled those comments, and like how they would brush them off, and like would allow those comments to just happen. And so that like made me really angry. And I think that was another thing that kind of fueled me to want to make this film. And so yeah, I got permission from the families, and something that was really important to me was that I was like creating that film with them, like not for them.
mm,
Like I try and not have hierarchies in my documentary work, especially because I'm really interested in telling stories that are like very difficult stories that might have a certain level of trauma within them, but like there's a way to handle stories like that with a lot of care, and being really genuine, and I think the way to do that is by involving the subjects, like we like, what is that word, like by involving them like in the process as much as possible.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will say that you shouldn't do that, like don't show them the interview, like, you know what I mean? But I totally disagree. I think when you're working with stories that are so loaded, like
Mhm.
you need to involve the people in it as much as possible.
Yeah, and because I think there's been like a really big conversation recently, particularly I think around like true crime in general, for example, but
Mhm.
like specifically around the new Dahmer show and about
Yeah.
how like what is exploitative and what isn't, and like
Mhm.
how do you kind of balance that? And I think another thing that another conversation we've had on this podcast a lot is like how a lot of the stories that do well coming from people of color and Black and Indigenous people of color is like stories about trauma, and those are the ones that get the
Right.
attention and get the accolades and get the awards and get
Right,
produced
yeah.
and whatever. So like how what are your thoughts on that? Like you've talked a little bit about it, but like how do you balance
Mhm.
kind of that um like do that ethically? Like how kind of, other than
Yeah.
involving them in the process, do you have any other things that you do to ensure that like
Yeah.
people are good?
I mean, I wouldn't focus on it. Like my focus on these kind of films is always like what's the current feeling and what's the way forward, and then just
Mhm.
kind of like touching on the past that has brought them to where they are today. So another film I did this with is With Love for Manera. So Manera has had, like a really difficult past, and like we kind of briefly touch upon it in the opening, but the film and the rest of the film is about her journey of healing from that, and what are the steps that she took to come out of that, and what's her life like now, and what are the practices that she has in place to uplift herself
Mhm.
in her healing journey. And it's like those stories are, and ways of telling the stories are a lot more interesting to me when you look at it through a lens of like joy. um
Mhm.
Mm.
and like something
Mhm.
that I always remember is like that kind of, I guess, informs this is it might sound a bit surprising, but it's funerals in my family. So
Hmm.
in for Guyanese culture, like it's so interesting to me, like when someone passes on my mom's side of the family, and people get together and share stories, and there's like sometimes like roaring laughter for one moment, and then the next moment it's like sobbing. And I
Mhm.
always found like that really interesting, that you can have like all of these really heavy emotions exist at the same time, but like the prioritized feeling is joy, right? And like celebration of life. So that's kind of like how I also work, is like celebration of life, but like acknowledging like the difficult feelings that are coming up, and like those difficult experiences, but not exploiting that, and not focusing on it when there's so much more.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, it's such an interesting as Sophia mentioned, conversation, I guess that's happening right now in terms of what is exploitive and what is not exploitive, and the fact that
Mhm.
Muslims are often still portrayed as either victims or perpetrators of violence. But something you
Yeah.
mentioned, which sounds is very interesting to me, is the idea that certain people should be telling certain stories and they shouldn't be
Mhm.
telling other stories. I remember this conversation came up at our panel that we had at our last event with Claude Jolicoeur and Hamza Huck. And I think Claude actually mentioned exactly that we're being more conscious about who's telling whose stories. And Hamza kind of stopped him in his tracks and was like, well, no, I mean, why do I now all of a sudden have to be pigeonholed into one category?
Yeah.
And for generations, it was white people telling everybody's stories. Why can't I tell other people's
Mhm.
narratives or tell other, more generic stories? Like, what are your thoughts on that balance? Because that's coming from,
Mhm.
obviously someone from a minority group as well. And, it's just his opinion, but I'd be
No,
curious
he's
to know
totally
kind of what you're
right.
thinking. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Like I don't think, like, as a brown woman, like I'm only going to be telling stories of marginalized groups necessarily. Like those are just the stories that like interest me right now the most, because like I feel like I'm in a position where I have a responsibility to show some of those stories from within my communities and within the communities of my friends when I'm making art with them. But I really like want to be at a point where like I can explore, sci-fi and like horror and whatever, and it not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have to have like be like impact driven in any way. It's funny, we also talked about this a lot, like during the In Spirit retreat like this past weekend. Like I remember there's a lot of conversations like this that really made me think, because like growing up I wasn't thinking this way. I wasn't thinking like I want to make films for the purpose of showing this community's experiences. Like growing up I was like, I want to make musicals, and like I want to make people laugh and I want to make people cry, and I still have that, but I think it's because we're just in this like moment, and also everything that I just learned like through my education makes me feel like this is what I want to prioritize right now.
Yeah.
But I think like it can evolve.
Totally. I personally am of the opinion that any story that's captivating and told well by a Muslim creative is in and of itself doing great work to showcase
Absolutely.
Muslims in a light that's typically not shown, right? Regardless of whether the subject
Hmm.
matter is highlighting specifically, the plights of a Muslim community. But I
Yeah.
totally agree, especially in doc work. Like, the more we can shine a light on areas that often are left in the dark, the better. So
Yeah.
kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have a question at the end of that. I just wanted to make a comment.
Just really wanted to give that
Yeah.
kudos.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I appreciate it.
No,
Yeah,
of
like
course.
even though the work that I'm doing right now, like I said, like like it's pretty loaded. Like I'm working on a feature documentary right now with a friend about his experiences having had sickle cell disease, and having experienced racism in healthcare systems, and it's a lot of like difficult like experiences that we're exploring together. But he's such a fun character,
Mm,
to see on screen, and we're just having like a lot of fun making this film. And every time that we're filming, like we just have like hysterical laughing fits, like I'm like around him and his family and his friends, and we just like we have a really good time together, and I feel like that's going to reflect on screen, like what when we're in production and in post. But that like I said, like that's what is really interesting to me, is like if you can tell a story that has like real struggle within it, but you're doing it in a way that is entertaining, can make people laugh and can make people cry, and feel all the feels.
mm-hmm.
And do you have like a way? Sorry, Sikandar again. Do you have like a way that you like to, like, kind of make that joy a part of the film? So like it's on the set and it's kind of in the
Hmm.
relationships that you build and stuff. Is there a way that you kind of are able to incorporate that into your films?
I think it's all in the process. I think like I try to involve people that, make me laugh. So another project I'm working on is called One Day. It's my first short narrative film. So I'm involving, like comedians and consultants in it, and people who really know the culture and really know how to make people laugh. And that's really interesting to me. I think just like becoming really close with the story is really important, because the closer you are to it, like the more authentic it is. Um, and the more that you can have fun with it and it not feel like you're crossing a line when you're exploring like difficult subject matter. um yeah, and I think just like having really good references when you're doing something for the first time, and being like, oh, like I like how this scene felt in this, and I like how this scene felt in this, so maybe I want to do something like that here, or so yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. I'm like, I don't know why. I'm thinking about um, like how Ramy portrays Steve Way in his show, like his friend who's got muscular dystrophy, like
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
not it's not a thing, but it's a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I wonder what your thoughts are on that as it relates to like
Mhm.
representing something that's clearly like a difficult subject to
Mhm.
tackle, but still doing
Mhm.
it with humor. Yeah, it's just
I really love how his character is portrayed in it. Like, I love their friendship. I love everything about it, and I think the fact that like in real life they're friends too, you know, like
mhm,
that adds so much to it. You know, I have friends who have disabilities too, and it's not like it's so interesting to me though when people talk about me being friends with folks with disabilities as if it's some kind of like charity case, and that
mm,
like really like makes me uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so what I really loved about their relation, like this friendship between Steve and Ramy, was just how like natural it is, and how, you know, like genuine it is, and how they can like make fun of each other. Like I really love the fact that like they make fun of each other all the time, so I'm like, that's how I am with all of my friends.
mhm.
Like we're really brutal to each other like all
Yeah,
the time, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it goes towards playing into like what we've all been fighting for, which is like not just representation, but like nuanced representation, you
Mhm.
know, like
Exactly.
recognizing that there's like more to each one of us than just like one
Mhm.
defining characteristic, whether it's our faith
Mhm.
or, you know, any sort of medical condition we're dealing with or whatever the case is, right? Yeah, it's
Right.
just an interesting. So, okay. So tell us a little more about One Day. Like what you mentioned, it's your first narrative short.
Mhm.
Any other information you can share with us at this point?
Yeah, so it's about a Muslim Indo-Caribbean teen daydreaming throughout her day to seek her inner confidence. And it's inspired by me as a teenager. It's inspired by other friends who have shared their experiences being teens, you know, in this country. And yeah, I've also met a lot of young women of color and young Muslim women who are very hesitant to explore or pursue, you know, like careers, relationships that they're really interested in. And I think this film is for them. This film is for those young women who, you know, just feel really hesitant to do the things that they really do want to do. And, you know, giving them permission to go after whatever that is and, you know, mess up. And just like
Mhm.
experience life. Because I mean, like for me, I think it was wanting to pursue film but not feeling like I should, or you know, not feeling like that's like the right thing to do because of how ingrained in like the academia I was, you know. It's like, well, I'm going to throw away all of this knowledge, or you know. So yeah, I think this is that. And you know, I try and have different kinds of Muslim representation in it. That's one thing that's like intentional when it comes to the way that I represent Muslim experiences. There is you know, the main character, she, you know, she wears a hijab, but it's not necessarily something that, you know, is a focus in any way, shape, or form. It's just something that like is important to her. And then there is, you know, her friend who, you know, is a little bit more judgmental of the main character and wanting to explore a little bit more about herself. And then there's another character who is also a Muslim, but you know, when you look at this person, you know, stereotypically you wouldn't assume, you know, maybe that, you know, that person is a Muslim woman, right? So I'm just
Mm,
trying to you know, show that breadth of experiences of what it's like to be a Muslim woman, and how there's many different ways of that. Because um something that I've, you know, taken issue with a lot of like Muslim woman representation recently is like how a lot of the times it's like very boxed in, and I'm like, I'm not seeing all the different ways that you can be a Muslim woman. But like I have so many like Muslim friends, and like they're all so like different from each other, but all like so beautiful, and they're all so like, you know, like independent and driven, and I'm so inspired by them, and like none of them are alike, you know. And so that's what I want to show in this film too, is that there's so many ways to be, and like we can't say like one is wrong or one is better than the other.
Mhm. I love that. I have this thing that I've started calling like secret Muslims, where I'll be like watching a show or something and I'm like, oh my God, like there's a Muslim, but it's like not obvious that they're Muslim.
Yeah.
And I like really love that because as we've been talking
Yeah,
about, like, I'm like, like it's just so nice to just like be a part of the community, to just like be a part of this
exactly.
thing. And
Exactly.
I don't know if you guys agree with me, but like, so if have you seen Ted Lasso?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
No.
Samo Bisanya,
You
like
haven't
would be
seen
most
Ted Lasso? Hold on, we
yes.
need
Oh
to
my God,
pivot.
wait.
Oh no.
Sorry, I just skipped right over that. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so
Yeah.
joyful
Okay,
and
writing it
wholesome.
down
You
right
got homework,
Like
now.
Yasmin. You got
tonight,
Oh
homework.
God.
tonight,
Okay,
you have
okay,
to
got
start.
it. I'm sorry. I'm so confused. Okay, I'm
But
writing it down.
okay, well, I
That's
guess this is a question.
Got
TEDLA. No,
it. I
I
got it.
guess
I
this
got it.
is a question for just Sikandar then, which makes it infinitely less cool. But I'll
oh
ask it
wow.
anyway. No, just but like, so Samo Bisanya's character is like Muslim, right? But it's like secret.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like there's like tiny things where it's like never talked about, but like you'll see his like cubby in like the locker room. It's a show about football.
He's like a soccer player. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he has like a picture of his family, and it's like they look potentially Muslim, and then like it's like a shot of like all the players before they play, and like he's like praying, and you're like, what? But it's like so subtle, like the fact that he's
Mhm.
Muslim isn't even like mentioned, which like
Yeah.
I
Yes and
kind of
no, but because he's also like coming from like some African country, and you can tell he's got like that immigrant story, and like you can like there's still, it's not like he's just some random dude who's from the UK who just happens to be
no,
Muslim. You know what I mean? Like
for
there's
sure,
still
for
that
sure.
as sorry, maybe we should involve Yasmin in this conversation. But yes, yeah.
No, I want to watch this now. I want to watch
Yeah,
this.
and then come back
Yeah.
on the pod and we'll talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we'll
Just
do
an
Yeah,
a follow
episode,
up.
exactly.
Ted Lasso with Yazmeen Kanji. That'll be
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
title.
Yeah. Oh my God. No, but I think that's so interesting. Like like with this short film, like it's not even necessarily about like any of these characters' Muslimness. Like that is what I want to achieve, is just like a naturalness to like the fact that like they are Muslim, and like they're going through like these other things, like
Mhm.
These like
she
human experiences.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like the film is like she wants to submit to a photography competition. She's not sure if she can do it. Like she's not sure if like she can actually say the thing she wants to say in class because she's nervous to like speak her mind, and just like anything that like a young teen is going to go through, and like things that I went through, and feeling those insecurities, and like giving yourself permission to like be yourself, like whatever that is, when like you don't even know who you are. So yeah, it's just all of that like messy teen girl stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, we've been having a lot of conversations about kind of narrative change and what that means. And there's a lot of people who are pushing back on this idea, saying, well, everyone's narrative is different, which I think, Yasmin, is kind of what you're touching on as well within your story, is that you've got a diverse range of Muslim women that you're showcasing their different stories in one day, and showing that, there isn't this like homogenous perception of what it is
Mm-hmm.
to be a Muslim. But how do you balance that? Like, how do you balance the fact that we each have different stories, but from the outside looking in, there is this perception of what it is to be Muslim that
Mm-hmm.
we have some level of responsibility to counteract, or do we, in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, I do try to counteract that. So, something that was annoying me personally was the stereotype of, a young Muslim woman needing to remove her hijab, or seeking the validation of a white boy. And I had a lot of issues with that, and so, in this film, like I do avoid that, and it's not a white boy that she's interested in. It's another Muslim girl that she's interested in being more like, and in developing a friendship with. And that's another thing that we don't talk about, is what it's like to try and seek out those friendships. I remember for me, like, because I went to a high school where I didn't have a lot of like other Muslims around me, like I tried to seek out other Muslim girls, and I was like, I want, who can I like relate to? Like who can I hang out with and be able to like be my full self with. And that's like a whole nother experience that I'm really interested in, is like exploring friendships, and friendships are just like so integral to my life. Like my friends are everything to me. And I really wish that like we spent a little bit more time talking about the importance of building those kind of friendships, rather than only focusing on like romantic relationships in teen
Mm-hmm.
movies. Because yeah, like friendships are what sustain you, and they're, you know, hopefully like gonna be there for you like no matter what. Whereas I guess like romantic interactions, like you don't always know like what the situation is gonna be, but like if you've got like a really, you know, good set of friends, like they'll become your family, you know. And that's another like really important message that I wanted to put in the film.
Hmm.
Yeah. I feel like there's like also like a little bit of like a cultural thing there too, or like I know like
Yeah,
growing up like similarly like my friends are like a second family very much so,
yeah,
and it's really funny because like I remember just like growing up and my parents would be like, why do you need to see them on the weekend, you saw them
yeah,
every day at
yeah.
school. And I was but like because I love them, because we have like a
Exactly,
relationship, like what do you mean? And
exactly.
so I love that. I think that's an experience that a lot of folks probably have of like certain
Yeah,
relationships being prioritized mainly family and romantic,
yeah,
but like
yeah,
friendships are just as important to like who you become and
exactly.
how you deal with life. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of like immigrant girls can like agree to that experience of like wanting to hang out with your friends, and you know exactly hearing that like,
Yeah.
oh, you just hung out with them, like why do you need to do it
Yeah.
again, you know?
Yeah, like, wasn't
um
that enough? And you're like, no.
No, exactly, or I'd remember, like, begging to, like, sleep over at my friend's place,
Mhm.
you know, because, like,
Mhm.
how many of us were actually allowed to, like, go to the
Yeah.
sleepovers, you know?
Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then it's like you grow up and you're not maybe always focused on like the importance of building friendships, because maybe like that wasn't always something that like was encouraged growing up. But then
Mhm.
when you're older, like you realize how important friendships are when you're on your
Mhm.
own, and like how friends can become your family, you know,
Mhm.
take you to the airport, like take you to your health appointments, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's important.
Yeah. Definitely. That's really cool. I'm
Yeah.
excited. What so when is one day happening?
So we're actually just about to put out casting calls. So
Nice.
Right
we're in like
on.
crunch time right now. It's really exciting. It's super nerve-wracking. I've wanted to direct narrative films my entire life, and the most
Mhm.
I've done is just like, you know, short films here and there in high school. But the thing with me is like I didn't want to put anything else out before this, because for me like I want to have all my resources in place to really show what I'm capable of, and not just kind
Mm.
of put something out like before I feel ready. And that's just the way that I go about it. Like we're probably not going to shoot until early May, but um I want to find people to work with who I can, you know, really get to know along the way and develop relationships with the actors. Because you know, like finding actors is really hard, and especially when you're casting for a Muslim Indo-Caribbean character, right? Like that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And it's not because the talent doesn't exist. It's just because it's harder to access communities who aren't always, you know, like told that you're allowed to kind of like, you know, attempt to do this work, right?
Mhm.
So we're going to be doing like a deep dive in this casting process and really make sure that it goes out to as many communities in the GTA as possible. So yeah, that's really important to me. Like I said, I'm working with consultants. I'm working with the founder of the Muslim Indo-Caribbean Collective, this like other like Guyanese TikTok star. She's just so funny, and like I messaged her and she's so excited and like reviewing my script with me. And um yeah, so I'm super stoked about it. Like we've got funding. I actually started writing the script like during COVID, haha, as like most of
Mm.
as like most of us started during COVID. But yeah, I think I actually started out like writing a feature version of it, and then just kind of like, you know, brought it down from there. And I was like, okay, like if this film was going to take place like over the course of one day, like what would it look
Mhm.
like?
Hmm.
And then that's how I started kind of like trimming it down and like trying to develop like a story that could, have an arc over the course of like one day, which is, probably going to be around like 10 minutes or so. But yeah, like the distribution process is going to be really important because, we want it to reach the communities that can like have fun from watching this film and like benefit from like seeing that visibility, especially because like no one that I have met is like working in this industry from an Indo-Caribbean background. And I think that's like a experience that's so specific and so unique. And for me, like I've had a lot of trouble, I guess, finding places where I could feel like my full self because, as we've said, like I just come from like so many different like cultural experiences. But like specifically with like the Guyanese experience, there's just not a lot of representation out there. Like I don't know if either of you can even think of anything. Like probably not, right?
Like the girl from Love is
No.
or no, from Indian Matchmaking. That's the only
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
only one I can
exactly.
think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? And
Also
it's
say
so
P Rain, the
interesting.
rapper. I don't know who that is.
Oh,
P
okay.
Rain.
P
I don't
Rain,
know who it
yeah.
is.
And there's just like there's all this history that is so interesting to me that like we're not taught about. And even like I have a couple friends from Mumbai, like they had no idea like what it meant to be Indo-Caribbean. Like they were so shocked, but basically it's like, these folks came to the Caribbean in the early 1900s, some as indentured laborers, which were forced, and others, came for opportunities. But like either way, like this group of like this, massive group of South Asian folks have been in the Caribbean for decades. And when you come to North America, like it's hard to fit into like a South Asian community more generally because being Indo-Caribbean is just it's such a specific like experience that you just can't like you can't mold into like general. Like I don't feel like I can relate to a lot of the Indian or Pakistani friends that I have because I just grew up differently. Like it's not just like the food and like music and stuff like that, but I think it's just um like it's the way that I speak to my parents that's sometimes like a little bit alarming to people. Like we're very direct, I guess, with the way that we talk, you know what I mean? It's like, no, we're not fighting. Like that's just the way we talk, you know what I mean? you know or things like that. So I'm really looking forward to being able to create a character like this that like hasn't really been seen before.
That's
And
awesome.
will you be submitting this film to the Mosquers, maybe?
Oh yeah, you better.
Yeah,
Coming
absolutely.
to the Oscars 2023. Yeah.
Yeah.
2024 actually, but
2024?
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. You know what? Take your time with it. Take your time with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got you.
Yeah. One of the people that's executive producing this is Charles Officer, who I know you've had like an interesting uh, journey to getting him to be a part of this project. You just I think there's like an important lesson that people could potentially learn from how you made that happen. Can you just kind of walk us through that quickly?
Sure. Okay. And then just to note, Charles Officer is the executive producer of The Sickling, which is the feature
Oh,
documentary.
okay. Got you. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so when I was in first year at U of T and sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I graduated, I felt like I wanted to make sure that I had dipped my toes like everywhere I could like before graduating so that I knew like what I was really going to be launching myself into. So I interned at a couple of like nonprofit organizations, refugee houses, and then I knew that in order to try and work in the film and TV industry, I couldn't really like send applications out because that's just I already kind of had a bit of an understanding, like from having that experience on the set of Saving Hope, that this is very much like a people oriented industry and that it's all about who you know. And so because I was an Innis College student at U of T, I was able to, like get the notifications whenever a filmmaker was coming to the school to do a talk or to showcase their work. So I kind of made it my mission to go to as many of those as possible and try and ask a question during the Q&A, and then maybe like go up and speak to the filmmaker and see if I could get any kind of opportunity out of that. So I did that for a couple of folks. Some weren't very receptive, some were just like polite, but like you could tell like weren't really interested in supporting me in any way. But then I went to a screening of Unarmed Verses, which is Charles Officer's documentary about gentrification in Regent Park through the eyes of a young girl. And I love this documentary so much because that's the kind of story that, I would love to be able to share. As it's difficult, but it's told with joy and with care. And yeah, I was so moved by it, and so I went up to him afterwards and was like, hi, my name's Yazmeen, and this is what I'm studying in school. I'm working on my first short. It's called From Syria to Hope. I'm really interested in like telling stories that are kind of like at the intersection of activism and art. And to my surprise, he gave me his personal phone number and his email. And I was so excited afterwards. I think I like called my parents when I was walking back to my to my residence. I was like, "Oh my god, this filmmaker, just like gave me his personal info, and like, what do I do?" And they're like, "Email him right away. Like, give him your resume. Like, do." And I was like, "Yes, okay." So, did all of that. I didn't hear from him for like 3 months. But then I interned at the Canadian Screen Awards, which is, I guess, like Canada's like Oscars, right? But it's kind of for like all media. And so I was interning in the offices during the day. I actually like skipped school for that week. I was like, I have to do this. So I was interning in the offices, or like I went to my morning classes, but then just like dipped early. Whatever. I was committed. And then they invited me to the evening event. So I had to go home and like pick out whatever outfits I could like pull together for these things. And Charles was there, I think, for Unarmed Verses. And he saw me at one of the events and was like, "Oh my god, like, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm interning." And I just kind of like nudged him, reminded him. And he was so welcoming. Like, he gave me this big hug, and I was like, wow, like, someone actually like cares and like wants to support me and hasn't even seen my work yet. And he said it was something like about, I guess, like my energy when I first approached him that made him feel like, I was someone, I guess, worth like keeping an eye on. And then I followed up with him, and then my hope went down because I didn't hear anything from him for 6 months. But then,
It's so rude. Stop leaving you on red, man.
He's a busy guy. So I get it. But then 6 months later, I got an email completely out of the blue, and he was saying, I'm at a point where I think I need an assistant, and I'm interviewing a couple of folks right now, but I would love to chat with you about it. And so we were in Regent Park. We were kind of just chatting outside, and I wasn't fully like understanding the Canadian film industry at that point yet, because I never really like grew up watching Canadian films, right? But when we were sitting there, like every other person walking by was greeting him, and then I started realizing, okay, like this guy's a really big deal. And so we had that chat, and it wasn't even like an interview, it was more of just like him getting to know me, and I was so like, I was just so grateful for it all. But I got the job, and I was an assistant, and then kind of moved on to being like project manager, and worked at his company for like 4 years, I think. And just recently I passed along another student to take my place, and now he's executive producing with Jake Yanowski the feature documentary that I'm creating right now.
That's
Nice.
incredible.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Hustle pays off.
It does. And like it was disheartening, like how many times I talked to other people in the industry and getting rejected, and all I wanted was just like one shot, like, because I just wanted like one experience to be able to like determine if this was something that I really wanted to do. Like, because at this time, like, I wasn't really sure, right? I was like, by the time I graduate if this is something I want to do. Like, my immigrant mentality was like, if I'm actually like gonna do like the art thing, like I need to do it. You know what I mean? And I need to like, you know, do it to the best of my abilities. So I'm so grateful that like he's the one that ended up kind of like bringing me forward, and I've gotten like a lot of exposure, a lot of really incredible learning opportunities along the way. I got to be on set of his feature film Akila's Escape. I was the behind the scenes videographer. I got to interview like Saul Williams, Vic Mensa, Denisha Prendergast, who's now a friend, and just like exposure to just so many incredible people who are just so wise. And yeah, I'm really grateful, and I really believe that it's all about like the energy that you give off. Like, if you know you give off like, you know, a genuine energy, and like you're being true to yourself, like you should be able to find people in the industry who can recognize that and who want to support you because of that, you know? Like, I find that a lot of times people feel like they have to like fake it and be like a different version of themselves. But for me, I find like I get the best opportunities when I'm just being like totally truthful about like who I am and why I'm here.
We are approaching the end of our
Yes.
time together, but before we wrap, do you have time for some quick rapid fire questions with us?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yes. Have you
We're
been
gonna do
prepping
it.
because you know what's coming because you listen
Like
to the pod?
generally, but like I don't. There's some that I'm like, I don't know. Okay, anyway, hit me.
All right. So yes, first thing that pops into your head. What's your favorite travel destination? Favorite place you've been?
The south of Spain.
Nice.
Ooh,
Yeah,
nice,
so
nice.
beautiful. It's like fusion of, you know, like European, but also like Arab, you know, and yeah, it's just so beautiful. I love it.
That is a great answer. Number 2, what is a movie or TV show that traumatized you as a child?
Oh my God, I think I remember you guys asking this at the Mosquers. I like did not know what to say. Traumatized.
You get a
Pan's
point, too.
Labyrinth.
Oh,
Is that what
okay,
it's
all
called?
right.
Pan's Labyrinth? Is
Yeah,
that what it's
that's
called?
Guillermo
Right?
del Toro. Yeah, that is a weird
Yes.
movie.
Yeah.
Eyes. That
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
freaked me out. Where he like has the eyes.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really,
That was weird.
it scared me pretty bad.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the pacing kind of scared me because I was like, why is nothing happening for so long? And then all this weird shit started happening. Very scary pacing.
True
Yeah.
terror of that movie is slowly.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Okay, what's a book that you would take with you onto a deserted island?
Either All About Love by Bell Hooks or Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I love both of those books
Yeah,
so much.
excellent choices.
All right. So
Skundar's gonna add those to his list to read those now.
out from okay. All right. Next, what is your most regrettable purchase?
Oh my goodness. This is like the one I was hoping you wouldn't ask because I truly can't think of anything. God, I don't know. Like my last laptop, because it didn't last me that long, and the battery went out so quickly because I just brutalized it.
That's that. You know what? We're not even gonna ask a follow-up question. We're just gonna let. How do you? You know what? That's fine. That's good. At least it got used, you know. But sorry to hear.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace, Yazmeen's laptop.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And lastly, our favorite question: what is your favorite kind of potato?
Like
My favorite
way to
kind?
eat
You mean
potato.
like my favorite way to like consume something
Yes.
potato based?
Yeah.
Yes, not like what is your
Oh my
favorite?
God, my favorite! I was like, what? How many kinds of potatoes are?
This is and when someone says
Okay,
it's
chips.
our favorite, she really means it's her favorite question. Let's be very clear on
Asif is
this.
like she knows the question better than Sophia. Oh my God.
I've been
Chips. I eat chips
chips.
way too much. Potato chips.
Do you,
Yeah.
what flavor? Because we all know no one
Miss
eats original.
Vicky's original. It's boring,
Really?
but
Okay,
I
never
feel like
mind.
it's you can combine it with a lot, you know, like you can have it with like really good cheese and crackers and like, you know,
It's a versatile chip. Yeah.
it's a kind of chip you can have and like not feel too guilty about the fact that you're downing a bag of chips, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I mean,
Like, when you feel more guilty having, like, downing a bag of Cheetos versus, like, Miss Vicky's? Or is that just me?
no, Miss Vicky's is definitely elevated. You know what I mean? Like
Right?
it feels like a little bit better for you.
Yeah,
Like
for
But
you.
I feel like Cheetos feels like eating air though. So I'm like never full. I could eat a whole bag of Cheetos and it like takes up no real estate, you know?
Yo. Okay, I'm gonna probably get a lot of hate for this, but the veggie sticks, but like the hot one is so good. And
Oh
it's like
gosh.
relatively healthy. It's relatively healthy, guys. But you
I
should
didn't even know they had a hot version.
it's so
Yeah, me
good.
neither.
It's
Okay.
so good. We'll share a
All
link
right.
in the
Wow,
bio.
to try it.
Yeah. Sponsor us hot veggie sticks, please.
Oh my god. Wow.
All right. On that happy note, before we wrap, where can people find you and your work, Yazmeen?
They can follow me on Instagram at Yazmeen Kanji. I have a website, yazmeenkanji.com. And yeah, my DMs are always open. I love chatting with people, answering questions, and collaborating. So just, yeah, send me a message.
Amazing. And as also mentioned, Yazmeen is part of BIPOC TV and Film as her advocacy and outreach lead. So definitely check
Mhm.
out BIPOC TV and Film if that's something that you guys might be interested in,
Yeah.
as well as Films with a Cause. Are you guys still taking on active consulting projects there?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually just really starting with that because we were developing like the business plan for a while. We're doing some pitching to get some startup funding. So yeah, it's exciting.
Amazing.
It's just kind of
And,
starting off now.
and that's filmswithacause.com, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, Yazmeen, thank you again so much
Thank
for
you.
being
I
a
had so
part of
much
this.
fun. Yeah, this
So
was
great.
awesome. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Stay tuned for more episodes and follow our brand new Instagram page at the halal_gap. That's at the halal_gap. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find the Mosquers on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Vikram Chauhan, our tile artist, Narmeen Syed, our researcher, Zaid Hassan, and our producer, Asif Quraishi. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about our podcast, you can email Asif at themosquers.com. On behalf of Sophia and myself, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.